Mom said, if you walk out of this house, don't ever come back. 6 a.m. Morgan stood at the kitchen door. Her hand trembled slightly as it touched the doorknob, not from the cold, but because inside was the mother she hadn't spoken to in 2 years. The house still the same. The fridge creaked, the family photo still hung on the wall, but it no longer felt like home. Morgan used to be the first to wake up and make coffee for her mom. Now she wasn't even sure if her mom remembered she liked it black. 2 years ago, one sentence shattered everything, and now she came back. But she wasn't sure she was the same daughter anymore, because there was one thing Morgan had never dared to tell her mother. The last time Morgan had dinner with her mom, Morgan once had everything close by. A job in her field, her own room on the second floor, and a mother who always served dinner at 7 p.m. sharp. But none of that was ever close enough to make her feel understood. Her mom never hugged her, even when she cried after failing an exam. Never asked why she came home late, only reminded her to do the dishes. And never once said, I'm proud of you. Morgan learned to stay silent, to wipe her own tears, to convince herself things were fine, until that final dinner when she announced she was quitting her job and leaving town. Her mom put her spoon down, looked at her, and said just one thing. If you walk out of this house, don't ever come back. Morgan carried that sentence for the next 2 years. Morgan fell into a dark place. 2 years after leaving home, Morgan had a new job, a small apartment downtown, a business card with her name embossed. But every night she sat alone in a room with the lights off, phone on silent, windows shut. No one knew how many times Morgan had cried, or how often she picked up the phone to call her mom then hung up, or how many nights she lay there listening to her heartbeat like it might break. She didn't need daily check-ins, but she once wished just once her mom would send a message. Are you okay? That's all. No messages came, only a notification that her mother was sick, and that's why Morgan stood here this morning, in front of the old house, with hands unsure whether to knock or walk away again. They lived in the same house, but not together. Morgan didn't hate her mother. She just never felt close. She remembered falling on the schoolyard, once scraping her knee. Her mom looked at the wound, didn't ask if it hurt, just said, you have to be more careful. When Morgan got her first period, her mom just left a pack of pads on the bed without a word. When Morgan won a scholarship, her mom didn't hug her, just asked, when are you moving out? They were like two adult women living in the same house. One fulfilled her duties, the other tried not to bother. And so Morgan learned to be the least needy daughter possible. No demands, no arguing, no sharing. She thought that made her strong, until she realized she didn't know what the strength was for. The message wasn't from her mom. It was from Aunt Mary, her mom's sister. Morgan, your mom's been very weak lately. The doctor says someone should be with her. I don't know what happened between you two, but if there's still time, come back. Morgan read that message in the office elevator. Among dozens of strangers, her heart pounded like someone had just called her name. She couldn't remember how she replied, only that night she sat in front of the house for 2 hours and didn't knock, just stared at the second-floor window, once her room. The lights were off, but for the first time in months, her heart started to ache. And she asked herself, if not for her mom, then who was she coming back for? She returned to the old house, where everything used to be quiet and now even quieter. The door wasn't locked. No one greeted her, only the scent of old wood and the ticking of the living room clock. Morgan set her bag down. She didn't bring much, just some clothes and sleeping pills. No one asked what she needed, and she didn't want anyone to. Her mom lay in the downstairs bed once used for storage. Aunt Mary had gone to the market, just Morgan and her. Morgan stood 3 steps from the bed. Her mom didn't open her eyes, but she was breathing steadily. It had been a long time since Morgan saw her mom look so small, not powerful, not tough, just an old woman sleeping. And that was when Morgan realized she didn't know what to say if her mom woke up. Work carried on even when Morgan wasn't in the meeting room. Her phone showed 47 unread emails. Morgan read every single one. None asked how she was, only deadlines, contingency plans, and a meeting without her name on the list. Morgan used to be the project manager. She led her team through 3 major campaigns, worked until 10 p.m., dinners of cold coffee, never took more than 2 days off. But in the latest email, the manager wrote, "If you need more time, we understand. But the project will continue with or without you." Morgan turned off the screen. For the first time in years, she wasn't angry, just empty. She once thought her career was the only place she mattered. If even that didn't need her, then who was she? In the old kitchen, Morgan heard sounds once so familiar and now like they belonged to a different life. The kettle whistled softly, the oven clicked as it turned on. The smell of toasted bread filled the room. Morgan stood there staring at the spot where her mom used to sit. The chair was still there but empty. As a child, she made tea for her mom, ginger when she was quiet, peppermint when she was tired. But her mom never said thank you. Morgan hadn't made tea again since she was 22. But today she placed 2 cups on the table, one for herself, one for her mom, though she hadn't woken. Some habits hurt more than rejection. Morgan took a sip. The tea was a little bitter. She wasn't sure if it was the leaves or the memories. She tried calling the office, not because she needed the job, but because she needed to hear a familiar voice. No answer. First time, second, third, fourth, the voicemail kicked in. Sorry, no one is available to take your call right now. Morgan didn't know what she was hoping for. A scolding, a chance, or just someone saying her name? She hung up, leant against the kitchen wall. No one remembered, no one needed her. She had done everything to be worthy. Successful, independent, no burdens. But somehow, the more she tried, the more she disappeared. And now having left everything, she didn't know who she was if she wasn't the one who does it well. Mom woke up, said nothing, but opened her eyes and saw Morgan. As Morgan washed her hands in the kitchen, her mother opened her eyes. Didn't speak, just looked a gaze Morgan couldn't read. Morgan walked into the room. Silence. I'm back. That was all she said. No apologies, no explanations. Her mother blinked, nodded gently, didn't smile, didn't turn away. 2 women, one lying down, one standing, and both trying not to break. Morgan stepped back. Her eyes burned. She had never seen her mother this vulnerable, and had never felt so vulnerable herself. Morgan began having old dreams again of being a child, waiting for her mother to come home. She dreamed she was 8, standing under the porch waiting for her mom to come back from work. It was raining, and her mom forgot her umbrella. Morgan ran out, held out a raincoat. But in the dream, her mom walked right past, didn't take it, didn't look, just said, "Go inside, your feet will get wet." Morgan woke up in a sweat, collar soaked, her heart pounding like a knock on the door. Suppressed memories started surfacing, not fights, but silence, endless, cold, longer than the 2 years apart, and she started to understand the real pain didn't come from what her mom did, but from everything she never said. Morgan once tried therapy but never mentioned her mother. The room was small walls, painted beige, brown leather chair, scent of lavender oil. Morgan sat there for 5 sessions. She talked about work, about exhaustion, about insomnia, but never her mom. The therapist asked, "When was the last time you cried in front of a loved one?" Morgan smiled. "I don't remember. Maybe never." She didn't think it mattered. The past was the past. Her mom did what she knew, and Morgan was grown, too grown to blame. But sitting alone in the old kitchen, she realized, because she never spoke about it, the wound never healed. And maybe everything in her life had started from that very place. She used to be proud of needing no one. Now she found that terrifying. Morgan had always been independent, worked, earned, no messy relationships, no parental guidance. She once said, "I don't need anyone to survive." People admired her, but no one knew that was how she kept from being abandoned again. She built a life no one could enter. Not even herself. Now sitting next to her mom, Morgan felt like a child outside a glass window, looking in, but not knocking, wanting to be loved, but not daring to receive it. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure she wanted to stay strong. A short email, no comforting words, but it made Morgan cry. "Morgan, just wanted to let you know they replaced you with someone new. The project continues, but it's not the same without you leading. No praise, no regret, just honest, no sugarcoating, no pretending." Morgan finished reading and cried, not because she was replaced, but because for the first time someone acknowledged her worth even just a little. She once believed no one is irreplaceable. Now she realized she didn't need to be one of a kind, just needed someone to see that she was real. In the drawer of her old room, Morgan found a notebook. She didn't expect it to be her mother's. The first page read, Things I Never Said. Morgan flipped through the pages. Strong, steady handwriting. Entries by date. Morgan came home late. I don't know if she ate anything. I saw her cry but didn't know how to ask. I wish I were gentler. Morgan let go of the notebook, rested her forehead on the drawer. For the first time, she saw her mother not as a tough woman, but someone who never learned how to love properly and was trying silently in her own way. A footstep sounded behind her. Her mom stood there, said nothing, but for the first time her eyes were wet. Morgan spoke up. For the first time she asked her mother something she had never dared. Have I ever disappointed you? The words slipped out like they couldn't be held back. Morgan didn't look at her. She was doing the dishes. A pause. Then her mom said, no. You remind me of myself, frighteningly so. Morgan froze, water running into the sink. Her eyes welled up, not from pain, but because for once her mom didn't say what she expected. She used to think she had to be different from her mom, used to hate the coldness, the logic. But now hearing that, her heart trembled. Morgan hadn't forgiven, but also wasn't angry like before. She went into her old room and finally broke down. Morgan closed the door, sat on the floor, leant against the bed, and cried like a child left behind. She thought she was fine, had told herself that for years, but now every layer peeled away. No co-workers to keep up appearances, no mom to prove strength to, just herself, and sorrow that had steeped for years wordless. She cried until her eyes stung, her voice cracked, and in the middle of her sobs she realized, maybe I don't need to be this strong anymore. Morgan was invited back, but not in the way she had hoped. The email arrived at 3:17 a.m. Subject: freelance consultant role, flexible hours. Not a manager, not official, just temporary cover for a vacancy. Morgan stared at the screen. A familiar feeling surged. I'm not good enough. She once dreamed of returning head held high. But they invited her like, if you're free, great. If not, no big deal. Morgan put the phone down. Silence. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure work could define her anymore. An old photo led Morgan back to a memory she didn't expect. Morgan found an old photo box. Family pictures, her 10th birthday, a photo of her mom hugging her from behind, smiling eyes teary. She didn't remember that moment, but the photo didn't lie. That look was real. Her mom had held her, had smiled brightly because of her. She had just forgotten. Morgan touched the photo, a tremble in her heart. She understood. It wasn't that her mother never loved her. They just hadn't called that feeling by its name for far too long. Morgan went grocery shopping for her aunt. A small moment broke her open. The cashier asked, shopping for your mom like that lady last time who had her daughter buy for her? Morgan nodded. Her heart clenched. Suddenly she felt lost. All those years in the city, no one ever called her someone's daughter. But now a stranger reminded her of one thing: she wasn't invisible. She wasn't drifting in space. But at the same time, she no longer knew who she was unless she kept proving it. She'd spent too long being the one who does everything alone. And now, when someone saw her as just a regular girl, she felt both lighter and emptier. Part 21. A silent dinner. Morgan cooked. Her mother ate. But neither said a word. Pumpkin soup, white rice, braised fish. She cooked it the way her mom used to. Her mom finished everything. No compliments, no complaints, no words. Morgan sat across from her, wanting to speak, but her throat tightened, not from anger, but from fear, that if she spoke everything might shatter and never go back to how it was. Some dinners, even without words, say more than 1,000 apologies. Morgan looked at her mom, then down at her bowl of rice. She wondered, is this a beginning or the last chance I'll ever get? The manager called. A clear offer, but this time Morgan hesitated. Morgan, we need you for the new campaign. You're the only one who's ever handled this segment well. She held the phone, heard a familiar voice. A part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to go back, to be the important one again. But then she looked toward the bedroom door. Her mom was sleeping. The house was still. Morgan understood going back to work wasn't wrong, but if she left because she was afraid to stay, then this time she'd be abandoning herself. I need more time, she said, for the first time not to delay, but because she knew some things mattered more than deadlines. Her mom sat on a chair. Morgan sat next to her. They didn't touch, but they were closer than ever. The TV was low. An old show. They both sat silently. No one spoke. But Morgan didn't feel tense. For the first time, she wasn't trying to make conversation. She just was there. Her mom held a teacup. Morgan grabbed some cookies. They didn't look at each other, but their breathing matched. Morgan remembered when she was 12, she once reached out to hug her mom when she cried, but her mom turned away. Since then, she'd never tried again. Now, she didn't need a hug, just her mom staying there in that room. Enough time for one of them someday to reach out. Aunt Mary took the call. Her voice dropped. Morgan knew it was more serious than they thought. The doctor said more tests are needed. There's a possibility it's pancreatic cancer. Stage unknown. Morgan's ears rang. She sat down. Hands trembling, a coldness swept across her neck, not from the weather. She had been ready to leave the house, to return to the city, to start work again, to go back to being fine. But now she wasn't sure there would be another chance. Her mom had never asked for forgiveness. She had never said she forgave. Between them still 1,000 unsaid things. If her mom left, would she ever truly understand what her mother had hidden behind all the silence? Morgan looked in the mirror. She no longer saw an invincible woman. She saw a daughter learning how to stay. She washed her face, looked in the mirror, pale skin, no makeup, no shaping. Morgan didn't see a warrior, didn't see a leader, just herself, plain. But finally real. She left the room, didn't knock, didn't ask, just walked over to her mom, sat down, and held her hand. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. Morgan took her mom to the hospital, but her mom wasn't afraid. The one who was scared was Morgan. The exam room was cold. Her mom sat still, hands resting gently on her knees. No questions, no words, no shaking. Morgan sat next to her holding the medical files, eyes locked on the appointment schedule. But her hands trembled slightly. Her mom had once been a wall untouchable. Now she was as quiet as the wind. And Morgan, who once stood against the world, couldn't hide her fear of the word cancer. "Are you scared?" Morgan whispered. Her mom looked at her and shook her head. "I just regret not living closer to you." Morgan looked away. Her eyes stung. That sentence hurt more than any diagnosis ever could. Aunt Mary told Morgan something she had never known about her mother's past. "Do you know why your mom is so distant? Because she lost her first child before you were born." Morgan froze. Her hand dropped the towel she was folding. She couldn't believe it. She always blamed herself, thought that if she had been softer, maybe that child would have survived. Since then, she raised you in a way no one could ever hurt you again. Morgan sat in silence. She had never imagined her mother carried such a deep wound, a quiet pain, that she, the child who remained, never even knew about. And maybe that coldness was her mother's way of saying, "I'm afraid to lose you too." Morgan spoke with her ex and realized it wasn't him who walked away. It was her who never let him stay. A message came from Luke, her ex-boyfriend. "Simple, I heard about your mom. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here," Morgan replied. For the first time in 3 years, they talked. Luke said that when they broke up, he wasn't angry, just sad that Morgan kept everything inside. "I felt like I was never enough for you to lean on." Morgan stayed quiet. For the first time, she looked at herself not as someone abandoned, but as someone who never let herself be loved. One morning, her mom woke early, and for the first time, they had breakfast together as two people not playing roles. Her mom sat up, messy hair, trembling hands, but she lifted her glass of milk herself. Morgan made tea, placed bread on a plate, sat down across from her. No script, no one performing, just two women. One who tried to be the perfect mother, one who tried to be the child who asked for nothing. "I'm not good at saying sorry," her mom said. Morgan smiled softly. "I'm not good at saying I need you either," and that breakfast wasn't long, but enough to reopen a door that had been locked for years. Morgan wrote a letter to her mom and never sent it, but her mom read it anyway. "Mom, if I ever hated you, I'm sorry. That was how I hid the fact I needed you so much." Morgan wrote it late at night, not planning to send it, just needing to release. All the hurt, all the unsaid, all the times she wished for a hug but never asked. She left the letter on the table, forgot about it. The next morning, Morgan saw her mom folding the letter. Her eyes were red. No words were spoken, but for the first time, her mother placed a hand on hers. No, I forgive you. No need. That touch was enough. She called the company, but this time it was to say no, and that made her feel free. Thank you for the offer, but I won't be coming back. Morgan said it clearly, without hesitation. The manager was silent for a few seconds, then replied, The door is still open, but if that's your decision, I wish you luck. Morgan hung up. No applause. No one said you're brave. But inside, she felt light. For the first time, she didn't choose an opportunity out of fear of losing it. She chose herself because this time she didn't want to abandon herself again. She found an old drawing and realized she had known what she needed for a very long time. Faded yellow paper, messy crayon lines, a little girl holding the hand of a woman in a long dress. It said, My mom. Morgan smiled and tears streamed down. That little girl was her. That drawing was everything she ever wanted. Not a big house, not perfect grades, just to hold her mom's hand. That paper, her mom had kept it, folded, tucked inside a photo album, among things that seemed unimportant. And Morgan understood love had always been there, just shown in ways neither of them knew how to say. Bad news, there's a tumor. But the real news is that Morgan was strong enough not to run anymore. There is a tumor, but it's early, surgery is needed, and close monitoring. Morgan listened to every word, wrote them down, didn't collapse, didn't break. She knew she couldn't control the illness, but she could stay. She could be beside her mom, and this time she was choosing to stay with her heart. Not from duty, not from guilt, just because she knew she still had something to live for and someone to live it with. Not with words, but with a gesture her mother said what Morgan had waited her whole life to hear. Outside the OR, her mother held her hand tightly. No words, no tears, just a touch. Hands that once cooked thousands of meals, now weakened, but still warm enough. Warm enough for Morgan to know her mom wasn't afraid. Because this time, Morgan stayed. She didn't promise it'll be okay. She simply leaned in and whispered, I'm here. That's all. But it was everything, not because her mom was weak, but because both of them had finally allowed themselves to need each other. The surgery was a success. And that afternoon, Morgan stepped onto the porch and looked at the sky for the first time in years. Soft breeze, blue sky, leaves scattered on the ground, no honking, no deadlines, no emails. Morgan sat on the porch, holding a cup of tea, wearing her mom's old robe, hair down. She once didn't know who she was without her job. Now, she still wasn't sure, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Because for the first time, she didn't feel lost. She was in the right place at the right time with the right person. One quiet evening, her mother stepped out of her room and for the first time, they hugged for no reason. Her mother stood in the doorway. Morgan was clearing the table. No lamps, just the warm kitchen light. Her mother walked slowly, smaller than Morgan remembered. Hands slightly shaking, Morgan turned around. No words, no warning. Her mom wrapped her arms around her. It wasn't a tight hug, but it was real. Warm, and long enough for Morgan to start crying. No apology was needed. No explanation, because sometimes a hug is the only language two people with enough scars can understand. Morgan discovered her mother had kept almost everything she once thought was forgotten. An old notebook from 5th grade, a birthday card with messy writing from when she was 10, a newspaper clipping of her first article published at college, all kept in a small plastic box, wrapped in a cloth. No dust, no one knew. Morgan stood still. Her hands gently touched each item. She once thought she had been forgotten, but in truth, her mother had remembered her in the quietest way, not through words, but by never throwing away anything that once belonged to her. Morgan decided to take a photo not to preserve a memory, but to begin a new one. Late afternoon, sunlight coming through the window. Her mom sat reading. Morgan sat beside her holding a camera. I want to keep this moment, she said. For what? To remember. That we started again. Click. No one looked at the camera. No one posed. But in that picture, there was peace. A distance that had been bridged. Two people no longer playing roles, just being themselves. Morgan added a few lines to the notebook her mother once titled Things I Never Said. This time, it was what the daughter wanted to keep. The last page. Morgan held the pen, wrote in slightly tilted, uneven handwriting. I used to think silence was safety. Now I understand speaking out is courage. Thank you, Mom, for staying and giving me time to come back. That notebook they both wrote in, never handed it directly, just left it open on the dinner table, sometimes a sentence, sometimes a line, sometimes just a small inked heart. Morgan closed the notebook. For the first time, she felt there was nothing more to write because everything that truly mattered was already showing through action. No words needed, no dramatic music, no grand dialogue, just a quiet moment, and that made it more precious than anything else. That morning, Morgan didn't set an alarm, didn't check emails, didn't open her laptop. She woke up, made tea, set out 2 cups, no invitation needed, no reason. Her mom stepped out slowly but steady, sat down, took a sip. No one spoke, but both of them knew they were staying. No longer the perfect mother and daughter, no longer the silence that hurt. Just 2 women each who had once been wrong cold tired, but had chosen to love each other again even if it came late. Because love doesn't have to begin the right way. It just has to be real when we're finally ready to stop and see each other.